Hi everyone, my name is Joseph Koensgen and welcome back to my studio. What I want to show you today is one of my favorite parts of doing any of the animals in my paintings, and that is the eyes. It really brings the animal to life and brings the whole painting to life once the eyes are done. Earlier this winter, I had a great experience seeing a great gray owl in the forest really close with just some light snowfall coming down. And so I've spent the last few weeks working on this painting, and I've got the face mostly done. All I need to do is the eyes. Now I know it looks a little bit weird without the eyes, but I'm going to fix that right away by getting straight to it and showing you how I paint the eyes of this owl. Okay, so before I get started, why don't I just run through the colors that I'm going to be using. The first is titanium white. Next I'm going to be using Mars black, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, and raw umber. And you might be wondering about the cadmium red light. That's just to warm up the yellow just a tiny bit because the owl's eyes kind of have a slight orange color to them. So that's why I'm going to be using the cadmium red light. Okay, so now that I'm ready to paint, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to establish the pupil right in the middle of the eye, and I'm just going to mix a color for that. It's not going to be completely 100% black. It's going to be black, some raw umber, and just a tiny bit of white because I don't want it to be too dark that it doesn't match other parts of the painting. So I'm just going to do a little bit of black, and then I'm going to dive in and let's start establishing the pupil. Okay, so I'm just going to get in real close here, and I'm just going to start by really delicately getting this pupil established. And the reason I want to do this first is so that I can kind of have a good idea of sort of the direction that the owl is looking and the shape of the overall eye, where I'm going to put the shadows and where I'm going to put the highlights. So I just do this real quick first. I am going to have to go back and go over this because when we put the yellow parts in, I will most likely overlap on some of this. So I just go in, and we'll probably have to do couple of coats because I want to keep it really thin so that it doesn't get too sort of bumpy with sort of these high ridges from the acrylic paint drying. So I think that's a pretty good start. I'm going to leave that there, and then of course towards the end, once we have the yellow iris in, then I can go back and adjust these some more, but that looks pretty good to start. So I'm just going to let that dry and start mixing up some of the yellow for the iris. Okay, so for the yellow part of the eye, what I'm going to do is I just want to mix like sort of an orangey brown color, almost the same color that I've done the beak, but I kind of want to keep it a little bit gray. So I've got my yellow and I'm getting a bit of white and a bit of black just to kind of make it almost like a gray color. And I know the paint looks really thin, but that's just so that I can build it up in layers, especially when I want to start adding shadows and highlights. I'm going to add those shadows and highlights almost like a wash, very thin, so that I don't get too carried away and build them up too fast and too strong. So I think that's a pretty good color. I might just add a little bit of white because I'm just trying to get that middle tone of the eye, just trying to get that color, and I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so now that I've got my yellow color, I'm just going to go in there and just fill in these spots. Oh, that looks a little bit too yellow. I might just add a bit of red to make it a bit more orange. Okay, that's a little bit better. And if it turns out that it's not orange enough, then I can always go back and just add a little bit of that later, just to kind of warm up this yellow, and it's gonna warm up once I start adding some of the shadows. And because the light is coming a little bit from the left to right, I'm going to keep the owl's, well, this eye, but the owl's right eye a little bit lighter than this eye, and this eye is going to be in shadow mostly. Okay, I'm just going to deepen that color a little bit more. And it's okay if I kind of go outside the edges. I can always clean that up afterwards. So it's not going to be... Okay, that's good. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to start adding some shadows. Okay, so for the shadow part of the eye, I've mixed in a little bit of raw umber and black, which is also going to dull this yellow quite a bit. And I just want to paint on the inside, like on the top edge and inside of the eye. I am noticing that I'm going to have to clean up this edge of the eye here later, but that's okay. And then this one, I'm only going to do the shadow on the top part of the eye, or at least do just that inside part, kind of where this part of the eye meets the edge of these feathers here. And I'm going to add some highlights here, and I'm going to just keep darkening, so I'm just going to add a little more black. I'm also noticing that it just needs to kind of stay a little bit warmer. So now I'm going quite a bit darker, and this is just what I want to do, is I just want to build up the shadows, and I'm going to do the same thing for the highlights, where I don't want to go straight into the darkest dark. I want to keep it light so that I can really have that nice gradient of light to dark. And this one, of course, I'm not going to go in there too deep with the deepest shadow. I'm just going to probably leave it at that particular one. Okay. And now I'm going to go even darker, where I've added more black, more raw umber, and it's also made it a little bit more gray, which is kind of what I want, because I don't want these shadow parts to be super vibrant. I want them to feel a little bit softer. And you can see that there is a bit of an edge, you know, around the eye that I've left, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to clean that up as soon as I've got this shadow part done. In fact, I kind of like that. I think I'm just going to add that on this eye here as well. Okay, now I'm going to add the darkest shadow yet, just to the center, or just to this edge of the eye, and just the top edge here. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, so something that I've noticed that's kind of been happening here is that now this shadow is just a bit too much of a harsh line, so I've just grabbed some of that earlier color from before, and I just kind of want to blend that in so it's a little bit more of a gradient. And I'm also going to go around the edge of the pupil here. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm just going to bring this down a little bit, just so that we have a little bit more of a blend. And I also want to go around the pupil here as well, just so that it's not so much of like a harsh line. And as you can see, I've kind of gone over that the pupil in both eyes here, and so I am going to have to go back and clean that up later, but that's okay. I was sort of planning on doing that anyways. And now I'm just going to kind of go back and forth, adding a little bit of dark, a little bit of light, to really just blend out that color. So now I just want to add some of that highlight. So I'm just going to grab some white and a bit of the cadmium yellow, tiny bit of cad red light, and this is just going to be a very thin application because I want it to just be the tiniest little highlight in the bottom of both eyes. Okay. Okay, so now that I've got my highlight color, this eye, of course, is going to have more of that than the other one because this is the direction that the light is coming from. So as you can see, I'm really just very gently dabbing it on so that it's not going to be too overpowering. And then this one is just going to be right at the bottom. Okay, so now that we're almost there, the last thing I want to do is I just want to clean up the edges around the eye and the pupil. So I'm just going to make that black color again of raw umber and a bit of white, and I'm just going to go in and just clean up these edges here. And then clean up the pupil. This is always a bit challenging because you want to be really precise. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want that pupil to be nice and round, or as round as you can get it. Okay. Okay, so now for my final and my favorite step, I'm going to take this extra fine brush. This is the only time I ever use this brush, is to just gently put the highlight in the eye. And it's easy to get carried away, but I just want to be as subtle as possible. And once you put those highlights in there, it just really brings the owl to life. Now the one thing I'm going to do in this eye that's different than this eye is I'm going to add a really bright highlight because that's where the light is coming from. Okay, so I'm going to grab mostly white and then just put a bit of a brighter highlight in there. Just want to tweak a couple of things here, make sure that everything looks good. And there we go. So once the eyes are fully painted, it really just brings the bird to life. And in fact, it seems to bring the entire painting to life. So thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about what I've done, just leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for watching.